There's this guy that comes in my house. He's kind of creepy, he scares me, and he raids my pantry. I call him Nighttime Thomas, and it's me, but it's me at night. I'm like a different person at night, and I know so many people that are like this. Nighttime Thomas makes cruddy decisions with his diet. Nighttime Thomas is out of control. My wife will tell you that she doesn't like Nighttime Thomas. Nighttime Thomas drops crumbs of food on the floor because he's ravenously hungry and grabbing things out of the pantry. Now I've gotten it under control, but I know that there's a lot of people out there that deal with this. So how do we combat Nighttime Thomas, or how do we combat these nighttime versions of yourself? I put a link down below for a 30% off discount link for Thrive Market, which is an online grocery store. Like, you can get dairy snacks. You could literally get like cheese crisps. You can get all kinds of things. Right? They are a quote unquote better for you option online grocery store. So you can do all your grocery shopping online, plus when you're using that link down below, that's saving you 30% off your entire first grocery order. So everything you load up in your cart, 30% off, plus a free $60 gift. But the thing is it makes it easy. You're not going to the grocery store and trying to find things and having to spend 2 hours. You can search. You can search by diet type. You can search by type of food, by dairy. You can search by sugar-free. It really makes doing the more complicated type of healthy shopping really easy. And it makes it much more affordable, and it makes it accessible. And I know that people are not always keen on online shopping for groceries, but I suggest you try it because it is a game changer. So number one, apple cider vinegar at night. Apple cider vinegar in the morning is awesome, but I would argue that apple cider vinegar in the morning is much more geared towards like a fat loss sort of driving up AMPK phosphorylation sort of thing, whereas having ACV at night is really good for combating cravings. Apple cider vinegar acts as somewhat of a starch inhibitor, so it actually slows down the breakdown of carbohydrates in your gut. So if you have it with dinner, it'll make it so that it delays the gastric emptying and delays that blood sugar spike. So you have a nice gentle blood sugar curve that's happening, and therefore you're getting a little bit less in the way of cravings. So when it comes down to timing, apple cider vinegar at night takes the cake. Like, literally, it takes the cake out of your hand because it makes it so you just don't want to eat a bunch of sweet things. So that's a big one. 2 tablespoons, mix with a little bit of water, maybe a little lemon juice, makes a big difference. Okay, next up is going to be having salty instead of sweet. It doesn't mean you go totally ham on having salty snacks, but what's wild is we have these things called NST neurons in our hindbrain, and what happens is these NST neurons actually receive a signal based upon aldosterone and some of these other things that regulate fluid. So when we're low in salt and we're actually craving salt, it triggers these NST neurons to drive us to get salt. Just like an animal that has a salt lick in its pen is going to be driven to that salt lick to get salt. So what happens is it's a very similar signal to what would be satisfied if we ate something sweet. So eating something sweet will pacify this salt craving, when in reality what we needed was salt. Well, I can tell you right now that having a half a teaspoon of salt is much less calories than a half a teaspoon of sugar. So if you just have a little bit of salt or like some electrolytes or something, it can make a big difference in what you reach for. So now I have some electrolytes when I get home because it gives me something to sip on, occupies my mouth a little bit, and it satisfies that whole potential NST neuron thing. The next one is quite a simple one. That is having protein before you even get home. Have a protein shake before you get home. Look, I know that people are going to say, hey, don't have a protein shake, don't have that artificial garbage, have the real food. If you can have the real food, eat a chicken breast on the way home. But in reality, it's probably more practical to have a Ziploc bag or have some protein powder on hand and just drink a protein shake on the way home. Okay, when I was in the corporate world and I was losing a lot of weight and I was working typical 9 to 6 hours, on my way home, I would have a protein shake. And then by the time I would get home, as much as it would upset my wife, I wouldn't really want to eat as much dinner. So Nighttime Thomas wasn't as big of a deal. And getting it ahead of time makes all the difference in the world. There are studies that demonstrate that eating protein first attenuates the glucose response. Now, it isn't all about the glucose response. Okay. Now, there's a lot of nuance with the whole blood sugar spiking, blood sugar falling thing. Like, blood sugar falling doesn't necessarily mean you're going to drive up your appetite, but it does mean that you're going to have changes in gut incretins and different hormones that can drive hunger, and it's not worth the risk when it's easy to control. Next one is having potatoes as your starch. If you want to have carbs with dinner, if you're having big starchy carbs, and you have a choice to have some potatoes versus, say, rice, I would opt for the potatoes. And the reason behind this is twofold. For one, potatoes are arguably a little bit easier to assimilate in terms of like how easy they are on the body. People generally are easier off with potatoes than they are with like grains, just generally when I talk to people. But they also contain a protease inhibitor, okay, protease inhibitor 2. What this does is because it slows down the breakdown of proteins a little bit, it actually decreases the breakdown of what's called cholecystokinin, okay, also known as CCK. I talk about it a lot on this channel. CCK is created or increased in our gut when we are breaking down like fats and breaking down certain things. Okay, so when CCK is elevated, it totally satisfies us. We don't feel like we need to eat. Okay, that's the benefit of consuming fats. The hard part is you have to consume a lot of fats to get there in terms of calories. So I don't say just eat fats to pacify your appetite because it's way too easy to go overboard on calories. So with this potatoes with dinner sort of thing, you have the potential to be satiated for a longer period of time because CCK is taking longer to break down because of the protease inhibition. This next one is wildly interesting. It was published in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition. It took a look at MCT oil. You're probably thinking, I'm not doing keto, I don't need MCT oil. What the heck is Thomas talking about? This stuff's a big sham. MCT oil is interesting. So this study demonstrated that having a little bit of MCT oil, like just 5 to 10 grams of MCT oil, versus like a longer chain fat that you might get from like almonds or something, that actually attenuated their appetite. It dropped their appetite significantly. So an hour later, when they measured how much they ate for lunch, they ate significantly less lunch when they had MCT oil. Now I know this study was looking at lunch, but the same applies with dinner. So if you have MCT oil powder or just straight up MCT oil, it could make a very, very big difference in how much you want to graze when you get home. And it might have to do with not just the fat and the CCK and the whole gut incretin, GLP-1, PYY stuff. It has more to do possibly with how it affects the brain. Because there are interesting studies with ketones and MCT oil and network stability and how it influences brain energetics that it actually might satisfy regions of our brain, making us potentially not want to grab food. So pretty interesting stuff. Now this next one is not rocket science, but it's probably the most powerful and also the most difficult to wrap your brain around at first. Have a monumental sized breakfast compared to what you're probably doing now. I would argue and probably put money on the fact that most people watching this video, including myself from before, eat light throughout the day, then they go home and they probably get more than 50% of their calories after they get home. It's pretty messed up, and it happens all the time for multiple reasons. Okay, wife cooks a beautiful dinner, yada yada, you want to save your appetite for dinner, you're hungry after work, you let your hair down after work, whatever. But if you eat a big breakfast, what that does to you throughout the day is almost out of your control in a positive way. And I know sort of this anti-establishment feel of, I don't want to have a big breakfast because it's what they always tell me to do. And I know we all want to go against the typical system and be nonconformists in some ways, but I will tell you that that's one thing we've probably gotten right. Eat a big breakfast. It doesn't need to be a high glycemic breakfast. No one said that. No one said you need to eat 4 boxes of Fruit Loops with some whipped cream on them, right? I mean, that sounds really weird. But I am saying eat a good calorically dense breakfast. A couple of things I don't want you to do. Things that are going to help keep nighttime Thomas from coming into your house too. Okay, first off, don't do intense exercise in the evening. Okay, now resistance training, I'm okay with some intense resistance training, but definitely don't do intense, super high intensity interval type cardio work. If you can get it earlier in the day, that's better. If evening's the only time you can get it, then do it. But try to keep your milder workouts to the evening. Why is this? Well, the hard workouts are usually the ones that drive up the appetite the most, but they drive up the appetite disproportionately to how much you actually burned. Right? If you go out for a walk and burn 100 calories, you're not going to try to recoup those 100 calories. But if you go and you train hard at Orange Theory and burn 300 calories, you're probably going to go home and eat 700 calories just because the appetite goes up. So if you're really prone to those things, that's not the best plan for you. But if it's the only time you can get exercise, do it. Avoid sweet beverages. Okay, that cephalic insulin response is a potentially real thing, but more so, it just lights your brain up and suddenly you want the cravings. I go for the saltier beverages. I go for the electrolytes. I go for things that are like carbonated water or lemon water, stuff like that at night. Don't eat a bunch of super high fat snacks, okay? Now, I love my macadamia nuts like I mentioned, but that's something I have earlier and midday. I usually don't have them at night because they're so dang delicious, I eat a smorgasbord of them and it's a problem. And then lastly, don't eat after dark. If you can just set those ground rules for yourself, it's easy. One of the things that I've added in if I really feel like I have to eat after dark is seaweed snacks. I feel like there's practically no calories to them, practically no glycemic response. They have a powerful effect when it comes down to gut incretins. They can help out with glucagon-like peptide 1, PYY, these things that help keep us satiated. So if you absolutely positively have to eat after sunset, try seaweed snacks. I'll see you tomorrow.